And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Payload down to nominal.
Flighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to NSF's live stream in the middle of the night of SpaceX's 33rd mission of the year on Starlink Route 6-47. I see all those 5x5s in chat. Thank you very much for that, and welcome to our coverage as we await liftoff in just about an hour. If you have any questions for us, make sure you tag us in chat at NASA Spaceflight, and we'll make sure to answer those as we have a good amount of time until propellant load starts, and we'll go through that whole sequence and whatnot as always. But I am not alone. Joining me today is our very knowledgeable Mr. Alex. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's already plenty of daylight here in Europe and everything, but man, I feel so sorry for everybody in the US. It's like what, 6 hours before me, so that's 4:12 a.m. Yeah, not pleasant. But hey, it's a launch, right? So we're not gonna miss it, and I'm definitely not gonna miss it.
Yeah. And poor Max Evans is out in the field for us at 4:13 a.m. Max, thank you for being out there, and thanks for being on stream tonight.
You know, we haven't said it in a while with good cause, but these late night Starlinks do be hitting different. Good morning, everybody. Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are watching from, and welcome to a rather gorgeous night here, even though it is a bit chilly here on Florida Space Coast.
Yeah, I mean, can you even call it the night when it's like 4 or 5 a.m.?
I mean, it all looks the same, but with it being 4 a.m. right now, this is just dog hours in the morning at this point.
Yeah. Then also out in the field we have D, and then operating the live stream we have J. So thank you D and J for your services as well at this absurd time. Anyway, Alex, this is SpaceX's 33rd mission already. Can you give us a rundown on what we're expecting to see today?
Or 34 if I count Starship. But yeah. Man, that's so many launches. Yeah, so this is just the usual Starship. Oh my god. Yeah, the usual Starship launch, right? It's gonna be awesome when we say that. But no, it's a usual Starlink launch on Falcon 9. Man, it's too early in the morning. But yeah, and so as you can see there on the ticker on the bottom, this is Starlink 647 carrying 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites. We usually get asked, what does this 647 and everything means? Well, this is Group 6. This is a type of mission, essentially like Group 2, 3, 4, 5. They all denote different types of missions. Group 6 missions are missions that are carrying Starlink V2 mini satellites to the 43-degree inclination orbital shell. Essentially, orbits are around the Earth, around 530 kilometers from the ground. That are inclined 43 degrees, relative to the equator. So that's more or less those Group 6 missions. So what that means is that for today's mission, we're going to have a southeast launch trajectory for this Falcon 9. So those, in the southern parts of the trajectory, if you're awake, go out and try and see that. As you can see there, that's the sort of trajectory for the first stage and second stage. The first stage will land downrange as usual. We'll probably go to max for that, but that's the sort of deal with these Starlink missions. They use this southeast trajectory. 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites, nothing out of the ordinary in that sense. But as you can see, it's already 47. Like, there's been so many Group 6 missions. Shortly, we're gonna have Group 7 and Group 8 missions out here from the Cape. Look out for those, because those will be landing right in the middle of the Bahamas. But for now, we're still stuck with Group 6 missions. We'll get those other missions probably in the next few weeks. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're gonna have today, and maybe Max can tell us about the booster. Well, there you can see also the second stage re-entry path. The second stage, once it drops off the satellites about 1 hour after the launch, it just safely deorbits, relighting again the MVAC engine, and it re-enters over the southeast Atlantic and southwest Pacific, more or less. Not Pacific, Indian Ocean, excuse me. To meet maybe with ship 28, right? That's more or less the place where it just went out. But yeah, that's pretty much what we expect for a nominal mission.
Yeah, so Max, as Alex was alluding to, it's a pretty nice booster on today's mission. Care to tell us about it?
Oh, goodness. Yes, it is. So on the docket over at Space Launch Complex 40 tonight is booster B1069, hopefully about to embark on its 14th flight here shortly. Having flown just 39 days ago, honestly, that's a pretty rapid turnaround for a booster that had a very rough start to its life. I mean, so to elaborate on that, this booster began life on the CRS-24 mission way back in 2021, I think it was, in December of 2021, and it had a rather aggressive or hard landing on one of the drone ships. I think that was a Shortfall of Gravitas or Just Read the Instructions, one of those two. Obviously, because those are the only two here. Duh. But it had a rather hard landing and crushed a lot of the engine bells. So considering it, just read the instructions. Thank you, Alex. Yep. But considering that's how this booster began life, and we all thought this booster was going right to the scrapyard, I think it's doing okay for flying hopefully 14 times tonight. And aiding in booster recovery tonight, stationed 615 kilometers downrange, is a Shortfall of Gravitas, and aiding in fairing recovery, is Doug. So every ship, as I've said before, in the fleet now is pretty much a veteran at this point. So business as usual for SpaceX.
Yeah, and we were actually just talking before the show that SpaceX has been setting, so many records this year. It's just absurd. But one of those interesting things was the turnaround time that SpaceX has been using with these drone ships, where they're getting them to the landing location and back very quickly, and then once it's at port, they're getting the booster off very quickly. Max, once they're at port, about how long is the vehicle actually there at this point?
So it depends on what the cadence looks like, and in this case, both drone ships. So on this last time, both drone ships came back in within, I think, 18 hours of each other into port, which is, I think, like the first time that's happened, and both were actually turned around within 24 hours. And so the fact that both drone ships and tugs and either Bob and or Doug are able to be turned around in less than 24 hours to go back out and restation is remarkable, because just 2 years ago even they were in port for at least 5 to 6 days before having to be restationed back out in the Atlantic. So they've just the pace has picked up so much. It's honestly pretty hard to keep up with if you're not really into it.
It's actually interesting because right now you can see there on the left side view that is Fleet Cam out there at Port Canaveral, and you can see there one of the drone ships that's just read the instructions waiting there. There's really like the next drone ship mission apart from this one that we are covering tonight is not for at least another 5 more days. So that's essentially why it's still at port. It doesn't need to go out just yet. The next mission from the Cape after this one is an RTLS mission. Essentially, the booster is coming back to land, so it doesn't need a drone ship. So I guess they're taking in the couple of days of breathing room that they have now for this drone ship. But yeah, these two drone ships have had quite an active month, turning them around very quickly. Shortfall Of Gravitas was probably the one that was turned around the fastest. And in fact, it currently holds the record for fastest turnaround time. But you may have heard that there's also a Vandenberg launch within 24 hours, right? That one will break the record again. With Of Course I Still Love You. Of Course I Still Love You will be doing essentially 4 days between supporting different landings and everything. It's crazy how they are able to pull off these things, not just for the launch vehicle and the launch pads, but also the recovery assets, also the ferrying recovery vessels as well. Doug, Bob, and from the West Coast they have Go Beyond. Like they have all of these vessels and everything. It's SpaceX's Mini Navy, I guess. We had a whole video about that as well. So if you want to check that out, look through. Maybe some mod can put it in chat or something, but definitely very, very interesting, all these assets that they have to be able to support these incredible cadence.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, right, as we were just talking beforehand, Signet Warhorse has been on the East Coast towing at what is kind of an unprecedented pace. You said they were getting up to what, like 12 knots or something around there?
Yeah, at least 11 knots that I could see, but I can imagine that probably pulling off 12 at some point.
Yeah. Then the other day, SpaceX's VP of Launch, Kiko, he had an interesting post on X where he was kind of overviewing a meeting that he had with Gwen Shotwell and John Edwards. John Edwards being the VP of Falcon launch vehicles at SpaceX. Just highlighting kind of how insane of a quarter 1 they had, highlighting Falcon, Dragon, and fairing labor hours and cycle time, launch to launch time on all 3 pads and all 3 drone ships, having 2 successful crewed missions for NASA, first ever Dragon 2 launch from Pad 40, flawless execution of the Cygnus spacecraft PACE and USSF 144, and then them, of course, hitting 31 launches of Falcon, with 12 of those being in March. And one thing that he highlights at the end that I really like is that Elon Musk always reminds us that the seeds of defeat are planted on the night of victory. Despite the record quarter, the team must stay humble, stay paranoid, and stay hungry. I think that's a really important thing for SpaceX to keep in mind, is not to get arrogant with their position and make sure they don't end up with culture, that eventually led to Challenger and Columbia and whatnot. So super good tweet to see from Kiko, and I've really been enjoying these posts from some of the SpaceX team members on X, since Elon rarely posts about Falcon stuff nowadays. Anyway.
Yeah. Essentially not assuming that, okay, we're already done it, it's okay. We're gods at this, so who cares, right? Who cares about safety? Who cares about this, about that, right? And then you start skipping steps and things start being done wrong, and then you have a failure. You're like, oh my god, what happened? Right? That's the sort of thing that you shouldn't do, even when you're doing things completely right and things are going great and everything. You still should be paranoid and hungry and all of that stuff that he was mentioning there, where you're like, oh my god, something is gonna go wrong, or something is gonna be like, we really need to make sure that this is all done correctly and everything. Like, be completely, on top of everything, so that all of your missions go as successfully as possible.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's what has allowed them to get to this position, is constantly reviewing that data, constantly looking at every single piece of hardware that they get back. And, I think it would be hard to make an argument that Falcon 9 is not by far the most reliable launch vehicle ever at this point.
Yeah. I like how, it's interesting because when they started this drive for even more and more cadence, that's when Bill Gerstenmaier came around, and he worked on the space shuttle. He never got to the point of actually, being able to do all of this, of increasing cadence and safety with the shuttle. But now he has the opportunity to do that. He's the vice president of build and flight reliability now at SpaceX. So they're like, building all of this up with complete, high reliability and high cadence. It's quite interesting. Like I really think it's an interesting note to point out as well.
I mean, there's really never been a vehicle like this where, you're having this many launches of of the same rocket, let alone a reusable rocket family. Right? Shuttle didn't launch anywhere. I mean, Falcon 9 is going to launch more times this year than Shuttle launched in its entire existence.
That's crazy to think about.
And the Russians have come, they used to launch a lot of those R7 derived vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's truly crazy what we are getting to experience. But with that, I want to thank some of y'all for your support. Mr. YYIB became a Red Team member. Welcome to our membership program. Molly gifted 20 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much, Molly. Flipper79 Flip gifted a Red Team membership. And then Curveless Sphere is asking, under the new FAA rules, if a Falcon 9 booster failed to land would the Falcon program be grounded pending a mishap investigation similar to Starship? Alex, that sounds like a great question for you.
I believe right now the license for Falcon 9 does not include the booster landing, so it will not trigger a mishap investigation. The difference with the Starship, it does reflect the landing of the booster, so that is why it's mostly considered kicking off the mishap investigation. It was also like the last time that they lost a booster during the landing portion of the flight. It was also with the old regulations. I think I talked about that in the past. Since then, I've also looked at the literal sense of the things, because one of the problems with all of this is that you really need to look at the literal words and not make up anything else, right? There's a lot of people that try to make up interpretations, and it's like, no, it says what it says. And if it talks about the booster landing on the Gulf of Mexico for Starship, and the Starship, the ship vehicle going all the way to the Indian Ocean on Flight 3 and probably Flight 4, to be fair. So then that means that those portions also need to be completed successfully for a mishap investigation to not be triggered. And I think recently we heard, at least from people from the FAA, that was something that they were working on with the SpaceX, where they were trying to essentially work on specific licenses so that could be a part. Like the launch portion and the landing portions could be treated separately, and therefore they could go much faster, essentially streamlining of the operations. That's at least a possibility apparently that they can do. So they're working with the SpaceX to be able to do that with the Starship. Falcon 9, it doesn't look like it has the landing portion at the very least. So that is essentially what I think it's going on there. But yeah, the last time that we had a landing failure of a Falcon 9, it was a long time ago, and that was with the old regulations.
Right. Awesome. Anyway, thank you, Curveless Sphere, for your support, and for those who choose to go above and beyond, thank you very much for doing that. But we just, as always, want to emphasize this is by no means an expectation. You guys just viewing and liking is plenty good. So thank you for being here, and for those who go above and beyond, thank you very much. Anyway, getting to some non-super chat questions now. Let's see, 21. Okay. Here's an interesting one from M60MG Man. Why don't the fairings burn up as they fall back to Earth? So Max, why don't the fairings need a propulsive entry burn like the booster does, even though they're released at a higher velocity?
I want to say, I don't know the exact answer off the top of my head, but I want to say it has a lot to do with the coating on the outside of the fairings being very very thermal resistant, and also the actual shape of the fairings too. The fairings have their own RCS control interfaces, so they are able to control themselves in the vacuum of space and in the upper atmosphere, and because of their very blunt shapes are perfect for re-entry interfaces in helping deal with high temperatures with the plasma. So because of the way they're shaped, I would assume that's probably the best reason why. And also with Falcon 9, it's a pencil spearing right back into the atmosphere with minimal surface area bouncing off of the atmosphere. So it's going to be traveling a lot faster. So. And also the fairings. Oh my gosh, that's such a fascinating question. And also being able to have fairings that are able to be recovered in the first place is amazing. But I think it's often.
Oh, looks like we may have lost Max.
Nope, I'm still here. I hit a wrong key. My bad.
Okay.
But I think it's often forgotten that the fairings on Falcon 9 actually have RCS thrusters and can actually control themselves. So, TLDR, it has a lot to do with their exterior coating and also their shape.
Yeah. Also, their low mass helps a lot, where they can get slowed down by the upper atmosphere fairly quickly. So then the plasma buildup isn't as intense as it would be for a heavier object, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of area and low weight. It's like they enter the atmosphere like a surfer kind of thing, surfing through the atmosphere. They actually take a lot of time because once they pop up the parachute, they take a while to reach the ground. Back when we actually had some commentary from SpaceX about the fairing recovery and everything, it took about it used to take about 40 minutes, 45 minutes after they separated from the Falcon 9 to reach the ocean. So that was a long trip down to the ground compared to the booster, if you think about that. And it's essentially about the same distance, right? And everything, and still it takes at least 10 times longer.
10 times, not 10 times. Is what, boosters like 8 minutes? And
Yeah, I mean it's probably closer to
9
9 times. But anyways,
I see. You're counting. I was counting T plus, where it's like what, T plus 8 minutes versus T plus 45, and I see where you got your number.
yeah.
Okay. Going through some more questions. Let's see. Here's a good one from Benny. What happened to the 24 satellites launching on the Starlink mission? So, right, we saw that one Starlink mission from the East Coast that had 24 satellites on board, and since that they have all been 23. Do we know why that is, Alex?
Well, it could just be that SpaceX is still working and tweaking the performance. Obviously, all that mission seemed to work well. The satellites were later tracked on the correct orbits, so it didn't seem like they had any issues with that one. But obviously, you can imagine them trying to still tweak things around and everything. I really don't know the answer, to be frank. But I also do see them trying, 23 for a little longer. We did see at one point when they were moving from 21 to 22 and then from 22 to 23, we saw them essentially mixing some of these other numbers, like earlier numbers with the newer numbers of satellites. But it's true that it didn't happen for so long. Like we didn't have that many 22 satellite launches after we got the first 23 satellite launch, and the same thing with 21 and 22. So Yeah, I really don't know, to be fair, but we'll see. We'll just keep an eye on when they come back. They do have that goal of eventually fitting 28 of these. I don't know how they're gonna be doing that. Good luck, SpaceX. But yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah, that 28 comment from one of SpaceX employees certainly took me by surprise. It'll be interesting to see what their path there is. But speaking of that, I've seen this question a few times in chat today. Do we know what all goes into maintaining the Merlin engines and on the Falcon 9 refurbishment? So in the 30 some odd days that since B1069's last launch, do we know what exactly SpaceX does?
Well, we don't really know exactly all of the things that they do. That's unfortunately one of the things that will be cool for them to like explain, at least on the very high level. They had said things like engine refurbishment, as in inspecting the engines, trying to see if things are still in the right positions, in the right locations, that they still work as they should. And then clearing out lines and things like that, because especially on the engines, with kerosene, you tend to get a little bit of soot in certain places, so they need to clean out the engines and things like that. But overall, especially for Starlink missions, I don't think they do that much invasive refurbishment. Like the Merlin engines just don't seem to be that big of a deal. In fact, we have had Merlin engines flying more times than boosters have flown more times. So like the most times that a Falcon 9 booster has flown is currently 19 times. And I believe SpaceX recently said that Merlin engines, at least one Merlin engine, flew 22 times. That it had supported 22 missions. So it's clear that at least the Merlin engines, they may get removed from the booster and then put on another booster, and that the booster flies a bunch of more flights, and then the Merlin engines just end up having more flights than the boosters themselves, which is interesting. But that's essentially how it seems to go. So the Merlin engine seems to be good, pretty much, and we just had SpaceX saying that propellant load has begun for this mission, so we are on track. We're already under T-minus 35 minutes. We should start seeing that frost building up on the liquid oxygen tank in just a few more minutes here.
Yeah, so with the start of prop load, Alex, can you take us through the events that we'll be seeing in the next few minutes and as we get closer to T0?
Yeah, so right now they are loading kerosene and liquid oxygen on the first stage and kerosene on the second stage. We're going to have those being loaded over the next few more minutes here. At T-minus 20 minutes or so, we're going to have the RP1 load complete on the second stage, and that's when they're going to start the chill down of the lines to the second stage for the liquid oxygen load. That is essentially what we call the T-minus 20-minute vent. And so you can see there, that's the LOX chill down that we denote there. And so that's in about 12 and a half minutes from now. And then they're going to be loading liquid oxygen load. They're going to be loading liquid oxygen onto the second stage around the T-minus 16 and a half minutes mark before the launch. So that's essentially the next few steps. Obviously, they go into other steps, as you can see there on the timeline. Engine chill, stromat retract, LOX load on both the stages will be completed. RP1 load will be completed much a few minutes before that on the first stage. Essentially, we'll get there when we get there in just a few more minutes from now. Don't worry. We'll cover those when we approach that.
Awesome. Yeah, so Max, I've seen a few people asking in chat about apparently our members' new favorite noise on some of these live streams. Do you think we'll hear the VAB squeal today, which I can now finally admit is real?
What do you mean you can finally admit it's real?
Have you
never heard it before?
No, it wasn't until last launch where I finally heard it.
Trevor, that's so disappointing. Man, but
It's
yes. But given the current conditions, there are no doors open on the VAB tonight, either in the high bays or in the main center door on the south side. But we should get a decent amount of squealing tonight, though. I mean, it's always standard, but the amount that we get and the pitch that we get depends on how many doors are or are not open, and that will change, I guess, the frequency that we hear. So, but either way, yes, we should absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, it's normally on these Slick 40 launches or RTLS missions where you can really hear it, correct?
You can hear a little bit on Pad A sometimes, but the angle just isn't right for the sound energy to be impacting the panels and bounce back off in our direction. So, yeah, it's most prominent from Slick 40.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see, here's a fun one that I think we should go around the horn with. Ghost Blackout is asking, what is your guys' favorite launch? Alex, let's start with you and
Are amazing. And there's
yeah.
it's really hard to pick a favorite because even within the same kind of family of rockets, like which launch do you pick for Falcon, right? There's been more than 300 launches, and even Falcon Heavy, there's been 9 of them, and it's like, which one do I choose? But yeah.
And it's even in the same rocket, how do you judge it? Do you judge it based on, the vehicle that completely blew up when they wanted it to on IFA? That was a cool launch. Or do you choose the one where America finally launched humans to the ISS again? Or do you launch, the first 10th flight of a booster or whatnot? But
yeah,
Max,
it's really hard in general. Yeah.
Yeah, Max, what about you?
So, are these launches that we've seen in person, or just launches in general?
I think launches in general, excluding Apollo 11 because that's too easy.
Okay. I have so many that I bounce back and forth between Shuttle, Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and of course Starship as well. I think the first 3 that come to mind, in no particular order, would be Starship Flight 2, just because of the visuals that morning, the sound, how all the pictures came out from that morning. It was just an absolutely perfect experience. And then there's Falcon 9 Flight 21, or Orbcom 3, which was the first time they were able to successfully land a first stage booster ever. And then, honestly, I think number 1 would be, STS-114 Discovery return to flight after STS-107 and the loss of Columbia. And that was the first ever launch that I watched live on TV. So I think, number 1, STS-114 for sure.
Yeah, it's a good list. I think I'm biased toward this launch because it's what got me into spaceflight, but I think I have to go Falcon Heavy Demo as my favorite. But it is obviously really hard to compare to the Apollo missions to some of the shuttle ones, like Max was saying, and all of the launches Alex mentioned. Yeah, that's a hard question. Speaking of shuttle, so that we don't get fired by our boss, Chris B, Tony is wondering, Do you guys think that a single booster will ever beat Discovery's 39 flights? Max, we'll start with you.
Well, first off, long live Discovery, best shuttle. So the original plan for the Falcon 9 Block 5 first stage boosters was to certify them up to 20 flights and then go through a major recert and refurb. But now Elon said that they want to certify the first stages for 40 flights. So in theory, yes. But whether or not the first stage boosters can handle that many flights on their structures and in the engines, I guess time will tell. So I honestly hope that the Falcon 9 first stages are able to fly more than 40 times just to show how over-engineered they really are. But I would say there's a very strong possibility of that happening. Yes.
Alex, what about you? Do you think they'll reach 39 or more flights on a single Falcon booster?
If you had asked me that 1 year ago, I would probably have told you no. Nowadays, it's becoming more likely because they have already said that they want to target 40 launches on a booster. Like they are currently certified. These boosters are certified for 20 launches. They're recertifying them for I don't know how many, probably 25 or 30. But the end, I wouldn't say end goal, but more like longer term goal. It's 40 of them. So like 40 launches on a single booster. It will also be some few years from now, to be fair, because it's already taken, I think, 3 or 4 years for some of these boosters to reach just 19, and like you really need double that. So yeah, still, with all of the increase in cadence, we'll see some of those probably achieving some of these launches faster. Because I think last year we had a couple of boosters being able to do 8 launches in a year. So if I do the math, that will be 5 years to reach 40 launches. So if you started right now with a new booster and then asked it to go all the way to 40, it will still take 5 years from now, so 2029, to reach that.
It's crazy that even a year and a half ago, 15 to 20 flights seemed like they were really pushing it, and more so 15 because the boosters stopped at 15 for a while to be recertified to go up to 20. And then, there's 3 boosters right now at the cusp of reaching 20. And now they want to go all the way to 40. So I we'll have to wait and see, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And even 15, we started, like, one of the things that I started doing when they were hitting 10 launches, that was the initial big milestone for these boosters. And there's getting to the point of, like, they already have, 15, 14 boosters or something like that, well past all of that. I cannot even manually actually go through all of them right now. And then now with 15 flights, that was sort of the next big milestone kind of thing, and there's already 7 boosters with more than 15 flights, which is crazy, right? And once they get to 20 launches, they already have 3 boosters at 19 launches. So it's gonna be very quick to see that 20th flight of a booster probably happening 3 launches, probably back to back in terms of how quickly that might go. I don't really know, to be fair. I'm just trying to guess here, but it's gonna come quick because now this is the 14th launch. It's very likely that within less than a year, we're going to see the 20th launch of this booster. Knock on wood, nothing happens to this booster. But essentially, the way that we're going, that's how we're going to be at in terms of, how many flights these boosters will do. And like the next flight of this booster will already be 15. There's already 7 boosters at 15 launches. So again, by the time this booster reaches 20, that'll already be the new norm. That'll already be something that we're just going to be very used to, where boosters are already hitting 20 launches, no problem. And by then, we're probably looking at 25 or 30 as the next big milestone kind of thing. It's crazy. It's crazy because every single year it just changes.
Yeah, it's also really impressive that this year there have already been 2 boosters that have flown 3 times, B1076 and B1067. So, if you extrapolate that, it doesn't seem completely impossible that SpaceX has boosters flying for 9 or 10 times this year, exceeding the 8 from last year, which would be, just another highlight of how properly insane this Falcon 9 program is. But with that, I believe we are about 40 seconds away from the T-minus 20-minute vent. So for those who may not know, this vent that is coming up will be very visible from the transporter rector, and that will signify the end of RP1 load on the second stage and the start of liquid oxygen load, and will signify in about 4 minutes the start of liquid oxygen load on the second stage when that vent ends. So Alex, as the vent is about to start, what exactly is it doing?
Yeah, so there'll be essentially flowing some of that liquid oxygen through the line, and there's this vent coming out of it that essentially just releases the gaseous oxygen coming out from it. Essentially just chilling down that line ahead of that liquid oxygen load. You can see there that condensation coming from that oxygen being released from the strumback. So it is very similar for those that follow along with the Starship development and everything. We see a very similar vent on the OLM, on the tower, and everything. It's just pretty much the same process. And later in the countdown, we're gonna have engine chill at T-minus 7 minutes. That is pretty much the same process where they flow a little bit of that liquid oxygen through the line. And in the case of the engine chill, that will be through the liquid oxygen through a pump, so that when they actually flow the full thing through it, essentially there's like 2 different kind of flows. When they start going at full flow through the engine, then they can essentially ensure that the whole thing is conditioned and chill down ahead of that sort of flow. There are many problems when you try to load these things and you don't condition your lines. For example, the metal fatigue, for example, when it suddenly cools down and it contracts and things like that. That is not good for the metal. Also, as well, you have the other side of things where the oxygen just instantly boils off and it just creates an overpressure on your line or on your engine, and it damages things. You don't really want to have that, so that's why they flow very little amounts of that liquid oxygen through both the strumback and the engine later down the line. We're gonna see that. Back when they complete the propellant load, we'll also see the comeback of that vent again, but that time will be to clear out the line so that at liftoff it doesn't get all blown out to smithereens and everything.
Yeah, and since you mentioned Starship real quick, we may as well talk about tomorrow. There's a road closure from
Or
10
today.
Yeah, I guess it is today now, from 10 to 2200 local. So we're not 100% sure what we're seeing yet, whether it'll be a spin prime or a static fire of booster 11. But hopefully we'll get a nice static fire complete tomorrow, where you can then go ask Alex about the vent there, and he'll be like, it's like a T-minus 20-minute vent on Falcon.
Exactly, I will say that. I think I'm actually not on commentary for that one, but we'll see. I'm definitely available for commentary, so don't fret. But one of the things that I could tell, though, we don't have an overpressure notice yet from Mary, but the OLM is being cleared of scaffolding, so we'll see what they do. But yeah, that's a Starship. Let's go back to Falcon 9.
Yeah, let's go back to some of our very generous viewers tonight. Paul gifted 10 Red Team memberships altogether. So if you got one of those, make sure you thank Paul in chat, and make sure you check out all of our awesome member photos and sometimes member live streams and all of the cool member content that we have. And then Steve with the $20 super chat saying, why is this launch so early in the morning? Also, when do you expect IFT4? Max, as you're the one who has to be out there at 5 a.m., why is this the launch time for this launch?
So essentially, SpaceX has a certain window that they want to launch this shell of Starlink V2 minis into, and wherever that window may be, given when they want to launch, will dictate what time exactly they want to send Falcon 9 up into the sky. And it's worth noting, in a window, whether it be 4 to 5 hours long, they have multiple T0 attempts for if they have multiple slots for these satellites to flow into. So I guess in this case, that unfortunately ends up being between 2 and I think the window closed at 6. What was it? 6:14 a.m. local time. So
Yeah.
that would have made for a very long night, and it already is a very long night. But to answer question number 2 for when IFT4, I don't know if I'm willing to put a date on it yet, but I will say sooner than we all think.
Say we're probably looking at the early to mid-May right now, with the usual caveat that depending on how testing goes, that can very easily get pushed to the right.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Starlink, I have bad news. The next Starlink launch from the Kepis also had really unhealthy hours. The window opens at midnight on April 10th, so good luck, Max.
See, that's not as bad. I mean, it may seem silly to say, oh well, 2 hours can't make that big of a difference.
Well,
I mean, it kind of does. It
But
kind of
it's
does.
still a 4-hour window. They could go all the way to the end, like this one. This one is still like, obviously it cannot delay anymore because they have already loaded propellant, but it could still have gone another hour and still launch. Just saying.
But honestly, like if we had to rate Starlink windows from like worst to best, like I think this would be up there in. I think this would absolutely be the worst, because potentially the sunrise is at 7. I think around 7:10 or 7:15 in the morning now, and the end of the window is about an hour before that. So we'd essentially be packing up and getting home right as the sun comes up, and that's not so much a great time to try and fall asleep and catch up on some Z's.
And
So
you
I
cannot
think
go to sleep early as well because you're like,
exactly,
well, what if?
exactly. You know,
What
I
if?
I still haven't slept yet. You know, I was laying in bed at around 10, like, oh, do I try and get like 2 or 3 hours here, or do I just stay awake? Because trying to wake up for these late night Starlinks can be an absolute drag sometimes, and it's excruciating. So the way to avoid that is just not to fall asleep at all. And yet here we are.
I had the exact same dilemma of like, do I try to get 2 hours of sleep before we go live? And I deemed it not worth it as well.
I got some sleep. I cannot say whether I regret that decision or not. I'm okay. Ask me maybe in 10 hours and I'll tell you. I'm gonna sleep again after the launch, but I have the benefit of being in my room. Max and D don't have the benefit.
Making a note to ask Alex that in 10 hours.
Hey, in 10 hours we're probably gonna be live for Starship, so it's gonna be on point to ask me that.
Yeah. So Alex, here's one more lengthy question that I suspect we'll have a longer discussion for. Philip is asking, is SpaceX on track for 100 to 140 launches this year? And the short answer to that is, in that range, yes, absolutely. Right? Just take the 31 Falcon launches they had in Q1, multiply that by 4, and you're getting roughly 125 launches, assuming they keep that cadence. However, that's not a very good assumption, as shown in just March, where they went from under 10 launches in January and February to all of a sudden 12 Falcon launches in March, 13 if you count Starship. So, taking that into account, I think SpaceX is easily reaching 135 to 140 launches. And it really seems like they have a possibility of hitting that 148 launch goal, right? If you just assume that they launch 12 times per month for the rest of the year, right, that's what, 139 launches? And right, it's likely that they'll increase that cadence a little bit to get up to closer to 150. So Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so they're definitely on track for that bracket, as you mentioned. One of the problems is that essentially, as you also mentioned, if you assume that they're keeping the same cadence, you only reach 125 launches, more or less 130, depending on whether you count Starship or not. But essentially, that's sort of the problem with that, right? That if you assume they're just gonna continue the same cadence, then you get to that point. But then don't do that. They ramp up the cadence, right, as the year goes on, because that's what they do. When you look, I got the question once of, oh, why do you assume that they're gonna ramp up cadence towards the end of the year? It's like because they're ramping up always the cadence. If you look at if instead of looking just 1 year, you look at the overall history, you see that they are ramping up, that it's always increasing in cadence, right? And therefore, when you put these imaginary cutoffs for each of the years, then it looks and appears like the second half of the year is going faster. But what is going on is just that they're continuing on that trend of increasing their cadence. So you're like, oh my gosh, why is it that every single year on the second half they increase the cadence is much faster than on the earlier parts of the year? And so that's essentially what's going on there. We expect them to probably achieve 13, 14 launches in a calendar month with Falcon 9 sometime maybe in the next few quarters, like maybe during this spring will be 13, and then 14 and maybe even 15 by the end of the year. That's sort of the expectancy. So when they reach that, that'll allow them to be able to compensate for some of the shortfalls that they have had during the beginning of the year, and hopefully that'll compensate everything and get them to 140, 150 launches. I think 140 is not that out of the question. 150 is a little bit more complicated. One of the problems that they have right now is from the West Coast. They're having bad weather lately. Like, it seems at least that the launch pads, the recovery assets and everything, they more or less can support these flights, this cadence. But the main driver seems to be at least the weather on the launch sites. And so, for example, on the West Coast, again, the first few months of the year, they have had some missions where they had horrible weather, where they got delayed at least twice the turnaround time that they were hitting for that mission, and it was horrible. Again, for example, the first launch that we had on April from them, that was supposed to be the 13th Falcon 9 of March, and it didn't happen. So that's why I was saying that 13 launches with Falcon 9 in the next couple of months, that may happen, because they were already about to hit that already in March. So look out for those. Then in the summer, we're gonna have hurricane season from the East Coast, so that's gonna be also a watch item there. It's gonna come down to the weather, I think, at the end of the day. We'll see.
So if you had to put money, I want two numbers from you: number of Falcon launches and number of Starship launches, for how many launches SpaceX will have this year.
I think at least 140 Falcon 9 launches and no more than 5 Starship. We'll see.
Yeah. Max, what are your thoughts?
So actually, one Mr. John Krause and I have a bet that by the end of the year, I believe that their launch count will be around 125, 130, and he thinks that they'll go all the way to around 140, 148. So, like Alex was saying, I was actually going to comment, but he poked at it right at the end there, being that even if SpaceX and Falcon 9 keep up the launch cadence that they did in March, I believe with the biggest factor that would have the biggest effect on that would be the weather. And with this I think this hurricane season is supposed to be a pretty active one. I think. Well, last time I checked the forecasts for the summer and the season. With that being said, I also agree that the weather will be the largest factor in their launch cadence numbers. So, as I said earlier, I think their number will hold around 120, 125, which in itself is still insane compared to what the rest of everyone else in the world is doing at the moment, even China.
Yeah. I mean, it's also crazy just to compare that to last year, right? That's a 40%, that's over a 40% increase that we're talking about for launches year over year.
And even
No.
if you want to rewind back to 2021, their total launch count for 2021, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, I think it was 31 for all of 2021. And they managed that and more just in Q1 of 2024. And that in only like 2.5 years, they were able to do that, which is that's remarkable.
Yeah. And one of the other things as well that I was thinking about is how they're doing this with Falcon 9, how big of a rocket it is compared to all the other rockets that, they may still do a lot of launches, and they don't even reach the cadence of Falcon 9, but still they come at a nice second position, right? Or even a third position. And still it's like, but they don't launch that much payload than Falcon 9. It's incredible how this big of a rocket, 17 meters tall, 3.7 meters in diameter. It's amazing. And they're gonna do this with the Starship. Like that's like the midterm goal with the Starship. The end goal of the Starship is even crazier than this. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Yeah, excitement guaranteed. Let's see. Going through some more of your guys' questions. We'll do one or two more before launch. But with that, I think Max has to go get ready for taking photos. So Max, best of luck. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's about that time again, and I will see y'all on the other side.
All right. Here's an interesting one from 21 Volts Gaming asking, are there any operational Falcon boosters that carry the Dragon 1? I don't think so, right? All of those got expended or lost, correct, Alex?
I believe so. I will have to look it up, but I think that is correct. Quickly glancing here through all of these stats that I have, and all of the ones that launched Dragon 1 capsules, they are already gone.
Kind of, bittersweet because Dragon 1 is like so iconic, and I don't know. I miss it sometimes, but obviously Dragon 2 is better in like every way, so can't complain.
Anyways, you can see there the Stromback has retracted. RP1 load has been completed on the first stage. They're just wrapping up the liquid oxygen load on both the stages. First will be on the first stage, and then about a minute later will be on the second stage.
Awesome. So yeah, Alex, what events are left in the next 3 minutes until launch?
Yeah, so essentially, as I was saying, right now wrapping up the liquid oxygen load on the first stage, which they just confirmed through the nets. And so we have liquid oxygen load complete on the first stage. In about a minute or so, that'll be the same for the second stage. And then Falcon 9 will be loaded fully with propellants ahead of that liftoff, hopefully in 2.5 minutes from now. And we're going to see the comeback of the Stromback vent. And as I was mentioning before, that is going to be to clear out the lines of that liquid oxygen on those lines so that, things don't go boom when it's time for liftoff. Because it used to be that they caught on fire these propellant lines back in the day. Now it's less likely, but still, you want to make sure that there's even less of a chance of that happening. So that's going to be in just a few more seconds here. We're going to see that vent come back. Then at T-minus 1 minute, the onboard computers will take control of the countdown. They'll still have manual abort capabilities all the way to T-minus 10 seconds. And I just heard the call out that second stage LOX load is complete. So Falcon 9 is completely loaded with propellants ahead of the launch, again, in about 1.5 minutes from now. And hopefully we'll see those 9 Merlin engines igniting and, with a nice and clear liftoff tonight. Or early morning, I guess.
Yeah, and this will be, again, SpaceX's 33rd Falcon mission of 2024, 34th if you include Starship. So, quite the impressive cadence that we have. About 8 seconds until Falcon enters startup. And as you can see, some of that venting that Alex was talking about earlier as they purge all of those lines. Falcon should now be in startup. Also at this time, all of the tanks are pressurizing for flight. So that's when they increase their pressure to ensure that they're rigid when all 9 of those engines begin igniting at T-minus 3 seconds.
And we are go for launch.
Awesome. That's when that launch director gives his go. T-minus 27 seconds and counting. At this point, Falcon 9 is fully in control, and any aborts from T-minus 10 seconds out will be handled by Falcon 9, but hopefully we won't see any of those today. Keep an eye out at the base of the vehicle for that green T-tab flash, as we hopefully see all 9 engines ignite.
There we go.
There we have ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of Starlink Group 6-47 and will now remain silent for a bit so you can hear the beautiful launch audio. Man, I will never get sick of the roar of a rocket launch, and I'm not even there in person. At this point,
The
the vehicle
crackle.
has yeah. At this point, the vehicle has passed through max Q, the moments of peak mechanical stress on the vehicle, and we are now under a minute away from stage separation. This will be 3 events in rapid succession. The first being the shutdown of all 9 first stage engines in an event known as main engine cutoff. About 3 seconds after that, you will see the first and second stages separate through 4 pneumatic separators, 1 central and 3 radial ones. And then shortly after that, the second engine will ignite itself. At this time, we'll have 2 vehicles to follow. So the first stage will continue down to hopefully a soft landing on a shortfall of gravitas, while the second stage will bring all 23 of the Starlink satellites into orbit. Pay attention now to those 9 engines as we'll see them shut down. There we go. Any second now we should, yep, there we
There's the
have
MVAC.
ignition of the MVAC engine. Coming up next, we will have fairing deployment at T+3 minutes and 1 second. So depending on the view, we may be able to see two fairings kind of fall away, but I kind of doubt it given it is well, not quite the middle of the night, but very
Nighttime.
it is
At the very
nighttime. Yeah.
least. Oh, there we go.
We could kind of see them. So those two fairing halves have successfully been jettisoned. So as we were talking about earlier, those are also being recovered on today's mission. Those will be recovered by Doug about 660 kilometers or so downrange. And those take about 45 minutes to get back to the surface of the Earth.
Kind of interesting how, it's not, there's no daylight hitting the second stage exhaust, but you can kind of see some of that brightness. I'm guessing it is the own light of the MVAC just lighting up the rest of the exhaust. You can see there.
Gosh.
How that looks like. You may see some dots passing by. Those are stars. If you see some dots going the wrong way, though, those are probably satellites, and most likely Starlink satellites. Just passing by.
Yeah, a view that will never get old.
Where are the stars? Well, there you see the stars. I'm sorry, I couldn't help to do that comment.
So yeah, now that we are about 4.5 minutes into flight, everything is looking good. We're coming up on another series of events. The first stage will perform its entry burn at T plus 6 minutes and 9 seconds. This burn is expected to last for approximately 25 seconds, but as always, that can vary. It's not programmed in, it is purely the vehicle is getting telemetry, it's getting velocity and altitude updates constantly, and based on that it decides when it ignites the engines and when to shut those down. So sometimes it can actually be a decent bit shorter than that. Certainly an interesting perk, or I don't know what word I'm looking for, but interesting tidbit about how the Falcon booster landings work.
Yeah, the booster has just passed its apogee. It's coming back down. But, fortunately it's in the middle of the night, so we cannot see much. So there you can see the intra-stage view. That's the only useful camera that we have from SpaceX right now. Obviously, apart from the MVAC engine obviously lighting up there, but we can see it also from the ground. So there you can see, we can also see it from the ground. So yes, the MVAC is still working. But definitely interesting to keep track of where things are, and hopefully we're gonna see that entry burn in just less than 1 minute from now.
Yeah, and as a reminder, the entry burn on these missions has a 1-3 profile. So it'll start off with just a single engine. That'll be the center E9 engine, and that will ignite first, followed very shortly after. Oh, there we have it.
From the ground.
Yeah, from the ground too. So that's 3 engines right now, and then it'll briefly go back to 1 before shutting all down. And those are the same engines that are used every time. I always see some questions about, can they switch which engines?
There's 1 and now shut down.
Can they switch which engines they're using? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
And there we have SpaceX's view of it. So you can see that line, which will go down to 1, and then now off. So now that looked like a successful entry burn. Landing burn will start at T plus 8 minutes and 1 second. So just about a minute here.
Watch out for that speed. It's now, it stayed more or less constant. It will now go down as the booster goes through the thickest part of the atmosphere. The altitude is also rapidly going down. It'll reach, subsonic speeds around 9-10 kilometers in altitude, and the landing burn should happen around 3 kilometers in altitude. And then you can see, speaking of altitude, I guess, that's the moon.
Yeah,
above.
that was absolutely crazy when Max was just following the booster, and then all of a sudden there's the moon above the pad. Holy cow. That was awesome. Wow.
Soon to be occluding the sun in just a few more days. We're gonna cover the moon a lot on Monday. There you can see it's already approaching the altitude for that landing burn. It usually happens around 3 kilometers or so, but we're not going to see it until the altitude is actually lower than that. There you can see now the speed is rapidly decreasing, so that means the landing burn is already underway. But the video takes a little bit longer to get to that point. You can see
You can
landing
see-
burn clear and
There's
going well.
ASOG.
A lot of birds.
There's that awesome blue that the ocean gets during these ASDS landings at night, and a successful landing of B-1069 on its 14th flight, now becoming B-1069-15. And that is SpaceX's 218th consecutive landing and 292nd total landing. Then also coming up any second now, we should have the first shutdown of that MVAC engine, which should have happened. And now we wait for the nominal orbit call out.
Yeah, it was nominal. I actually didn't need the call out from SpaceX. I was looking at their numbers, and it's always been the same. That is also why when they launched that recent Vandenberg launch, and like even the previous Vandenberg launch, they seem to have tweaked the trajectory, because I noticed that the numbers did not match, even though they called out nominal orbital insertion, but essentially they were at a different altitude and different speeds and everything. They were targeting a different transfer orbit. As you were mentioning, this is the first burn of the MVAC engine. They're going to have a second burn later down the line to essentially 50 minutes from now to circularize the orbit, and then 10 minutes after that they're going to be deploying the satellites. We're not going to be able to see that. They don't cover those anymore, but super interesting that they keep doing everything like this, and it just feels normal. But yeah, there you can see moon.
Yeah, and another reminder that this is just one of 3 events that SpaceX is going to have today. So this was their first launch, and they have another Starlink launch later, which will hopefully break Slick 4 East's turnaround record by quite some margin. And I think, of course, I Still Love You's landing turnaround record. And then also, hopefully, we'll get either a spin prime or a static fire down at Starbase of Booster 11. As always, we will be covering all of that, so you know where to find us. But I think we have Max back. Max, how was that? Fantastic job with the tracking and everything.
There is something about cold, thick air that just helps carry the sound from all 9 Merlins so much better than any hot summer air ever could. That was incredibly punchy. I remember I was looking over at D and just shaking my head, just like oh my goodness, like this is incredibly punchy, like and way louder than normal. The VAB wasn't squealing too much as what I suspected it might not, because all of the doors are currently closed. But as you may have heard through through a mic that we didn't know was hot, when I was tracking stage 2 all the way down and getting ready to track entry burn, I noticed that the crescent moon was literally is currently rising directly over the freaking pad. And so the way my mind goes with that is, can you just imagine if they launched like 5 minutes ago?
That would be so cool.
That would have been amazing, and that wasn't even planned. That this is just complete happenstance. I noticed that, and as you probably heard, I was losing my mind. But it has been a remarkably clear night, and a gorgeous one at that for launch.
Yeah, that was awesome. Gonna do a little bit more support real quick that we got during launch. RS said, get a script for monofill being used by DoD. I'm not sure what this is alluding to, but thank you very much for your support, RS. And then I see a shop order, someone getting our OFT3 patch. Kevin in chat asking, why is there a banana over the launch pad? Kevin, you must be hungry or a minion.
A very big banana for scale.
It's such a such a pity that they actually didn't launch at this time now. Once we've seen that moon, because then we will have had a transit.
It's such a tragedy, and it would have been like one of the most epic transits by complete accident too. Golly, can we
Yeah.
go back and try again?
Well, don't worry.
Hey, we're gonna get a transit soon,
Yeah, that's true.
but of the moon in front of the sun.
Yeah, so this is just the first of several launches this week. We also have, in addition to the Starlink later today, this weekend on Sunday, Bandwagon 1, which will be an RTLS coming back to LZ1. So hopefully then we'll get some VAB squeal if we get lucky. And then currently on Tuesday, we have the final Delta 4 Heavy on NROL 70.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. And then, of course, more Starlink missions, because who doesn't love a Starlink mission?
Yeah, another one on April 10th, midnight Eastern, 4-hour window. It's gonna be glorious. Yeah, definitely don't miss our coverage of the clips as well. We're gonna be covering that on Monday. Lots of different places and lots of different people. Just stay tuned.
Yeah. Anyway, let's quickly watch some replays of this launch before wrapping up.
Oh, that's from the robot cams. You'll see the rocket cannot be seen with this view, but as soon as it lifts off, there you can see the glow,
There it is.
and it comes off from those trees. Bye, Falcon 9. Bye. It looks like essentially, night and day when those engines ignite and the rocket lifts off.
Yeah.
Quite amazing.
Yeah, it really does turn the night into day. I can't wait to see these views of Starship launching from the Cape. I feel like that'll really bring back some of the Apollo vibes.
Yeah. And the other robot cam. I think that the view that we were looking at before, it's probably the robot camera on the right. Look at the lens flare. Like how bright that thing is. Look at that. You just cannot see the rocket because it's just completely blinding the camera.
Just exhaust. But speaking of just exhaust, I think we are all just exhausted. So thank you everyone very much for tuning in on this very odd time for a Starlink mission. Max, thank you so much for being out in the field and being on commentary.
Hey, it's a pleasure as always, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in. Closing out with the line, I guess, one more time. These late night Starlinks do be hitting different.
Yeah, and then also D out in the field. Just thank you for doing that and destroying your sleep schedule. Then Alex, thank you for being on and talking about all these stats with me and nerding out.
Yeah, and I guess it's time for me to plug. We have Twist later today as well. We have that Starship stream. I think Twist will come out after the Starship stream. So, keep that in mind. That's this week in spaceflight with Alicia. And I'm also supposed to finish an article for the website. So look out for that as well. It's already like at least 80% complete. I just need a little bit more. I know, Trevor, you reviewed it already. There's just a little bit more to write, and then we'll be publishing that in the next day or so.
Yeah, and then also tomorrow evening we have the standard NSF Live. So
True.
that will be EJ, Jack, and Sawyer.
Not EJ.
Oh, is EJ
see.
out this week?
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
Leaks.
Yeah, Alex and I are just leaky. Anyway,
You'll see what appears tomorrow.
yeah. And anyway, in the background, we had Jay Keegan operating today's stream. And I've been your host, Trevor Sesnick, a writer here at NSF. Thank you all for joining us. For my fellow Americans, I hope you get some rest. For those in Europe, have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside of speed off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?